It's no surprise that the real deal this week is about Gaza and its suffering and beleaguered people. Did you expect anything else or anything less? It's dedicated to the many hundreds of Palestinian men, women and children who've been killed in this pogrom, to the thousands injured and maimed from the sky and the sea by rockets, missiles and shells, and to the brave resistance battling against hopeless odds and an infinitely better armed Israeli army. We are helplessly witnessing one of the great crimes of our age, and history will not absolve Israel. Neither will I, or I hope, you. This is The Real Deal. Hello and welcome to The Real Deal with me, George Galloway. Each week at this time I'll be here in central London bringing you the news and views you just won't find in the corporate media. I'll be shooting from the hip and shooting from the lip as usual, but you could fire back at me at least by email at realdeal@presstv.co.uk. The two words you won't hear linked together in the next hour are the words Hamas and militants. This derogatory conjunction is used by the Bush and Blair Corporation, by Sky and other media to imply that somehow Hamas is, as the Israeli president put it, an illegal organization. As the rest of the world knows, or should, or likes it or not, Hamas is the democratically elected government of Palestine. And since it came to power, it has been subject to wave after wave of illegality by Israel, from exacting communal punishment on the people of Gaza, a war crime under the Geneva Conventions, by blockading essential food and medical supplies, by locking up hundreds, maybe thousands of its citizens without trial, assassinating its leaders, to flagrantly ignoring UN resolution after resolution. Now, I was never a supporter of Hamas myself. My sympathies lay with Fatah and its leader, my dear late friend Yasser Arafat. But I'm afraid we're all Hamas now. I'll be talking to Middle East analyst and author Trevor Mostyn shortly, and later in the show to Abdel Bari Atwan, the founder and editor of the Arab world's only independent newspaper, Al-Quds, who was born and brought up in one of the Gaza refugee camps, being brutally attacked this day by Israel from the air, land and sea. And in the last few days, his son is there now, suffering under shot and shell. And I'll be talking to former US Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, former presidential candidate no less, who put her life at risk by breaking the Israeli blockade of Gaza. There has been other news this week, but not that you'd really notice. On Wednesday, Russia shut off all gas supplies to Europe through Ukraine, leaving tens of thousands of people in more than a dozen countries without heat during the winter cold snap. This gas dispute over the pricing of Russian gas for Ukraine is a repeat of what happened in the winter 3 years ago. Russia accuses, with much justification, the Ukraine of siphoning off tens of millions of cubic meters of gas that was intended for Europe from its transit pipelines. President-elect Barack Obama met with 4 previous US presidents at a lunch in the White House. It's the convention that presidents-to-be don't speak out about policy in advance of their inauguration. And boy, did Obama stick to the precedent. At a news conference afterwards, Obama told reporters, "We can't have 2 administrations running foreign policy at the same time. We simply can't do it." He claimed his silence was not a result of a lack of concern about the fighting there. In 10 days from now, we'll know for sure about his concern or lack of it. However, another president didn't resort to weasel words about the crisis. Venezuela's Hugo Chavez went further and actually kicked out the Israeli ambassador. He said it was a gesture of dignity in response to the military offensive being carried out in Gaza. Last Saturday in London, tens of thousands of people took to the streets in a massive demonstration against the aggression. Many of us then went on to begin a 24/7 protest outside the Israeli embassy. But on the way to the embassy, Metropolitan Police penned us into an underpass, a tunnel at Hyde Park, and began laying about us with their shields and batons. I was knocked over. My daughter Lucy was knocked over by the police for the 2nd time in a week. We don't normally have music on The Real Deal, but I came across something on YouTube which moved me hugely. The song is Atuna Al-Tufalla, Atuna Al-Salam by, I think, Rimi Bandali, a 4-year-old Arab child singing in 3 languages, Arabic, French and English. The quality of the pictures isn't great, but the words and the sentiments are certainly moving.
جينا نعيدكم للعيد بنسألكم ليش ما في عنا لعياد ولادين يا عالم أرضي محروقة أرضي حرية مسروقة زمانك عم تحلم بآية أيام وين الشد الحلم والخوف الحمام يا عالم أرضي محروقة أرضي حرية مسروقة أرضي صغيرة مثل الصغير تزول الكلام بعضونا الطفولي.
Well, what more can you say? I learned firsthand about the Palestinian cause more than 30 years ago in my home city of Dundee from a young Palestinian student, and now in my day job I'm working in the place where all of this trouble was hatched, the British Parliament. It was in November 1917 that the British Foreign Secretary Arthur James Balfour, on behalf of one people, promised a second people, the Zionist leadership, a homeland of what was then a third people, the people of Palestine. And that set off all the blood and horror which was to come. My first guest is Middle East analyst, historian, and soon-to-be published novelist on this subject, Trevor Mostyn. Trevor, thank you very much for joining us again on The Real Deal. The last time we spoke, I said, I hope I don't have to speak to you again soon. Yeah. But of course, we both knew that that was unlikely. Now, I've brought up the subject of the Balfour Declaration because I want to establish in the British mind the British responsibility historically for this great tragedy that has befallen the Palestinian people. Tell us about it.
Well, on the one hand, Lawrence Arabia, T. Lawrence, promised the Arabs a kingdom if they agreed to fight the Ottoman Turks, which they did. Lawrence marched into Damascus, Allenby then marched into Jerusalem, and the Allies defeated the Ottoman Empire. Far from giving the Arabs their kingdom, the whole area was divided up through secret treaties. One, of course, was the Balfour Declaration, which was a letter written by Lord Balfour to Rothschild, looking with favour upon a national home for the Jews, without prejudice to the local people living there.
That was a total contradiction.
Total contradiction.
The one necessitated the prejudicing of the second.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, yeah, totally. And there was actually no mention of who those people were. I mean, 99% of the people of Palestine were Muslims and Christians, Arabs.
So the Arabs were deceived in the First World War.
They were totally deceived. The Sykes-Picot Agreement was the most deceptive agreement of all. The French-British agreement, revealed by the Bolsheviks during the Soviet Revolution, to embarrass the Western powers, showing that the whole area was going to be divided up into British and French mandates.
Would the Arabs have been better sticking with the Ottomans in the First World War?
A lot better. A lot of Arab friends. I mean, I've been living and travelling in the Arab world all my life. Really. I did Arabic at university, and a lot of my really thinking Arab friends have said, "Long live the Ottoman Empire." With all its faults, it was a decentralised empire which allowed all these religions to live together in peace. You know, I mean, today we talk about the one-state solution in Palestine, which I think is a very good idea. Let the three religions live in a secular state. Let's forget about religion.
Well, that's of course a long way off. Let's stick with the history for a minute. We then move into the 20s and 30s with a British mandate, a period you've covered in your forthcoming novel,
yes.
Building up to what the Palestinians call, the Arabs call, the Nakba, the catastrophe. Yes. What was life like during that period?
Well, the problem was that the British were not even-handed. Almost everything the Israelis are doing today in terms of bombing, massive collegiate punishment of peoples, and executions are all based upon the original laws and activities of the British during the Mandate period. The British were extremely violent, and mostly towards the Palestinians. It's true that the various Jewish terrorists from the Lumiere Gun and the Stern Gang, the Jewish terrorists were actually executed by the British.